Hey, it's me, Lizzie, and today we're going to be starting a little bit of new content for the channel. In the past, I've posted mainly speedrun videos and stuff like that, but I want to start getting into, you know, more um, analysis-based things. So this will be a tier list of every level in Donkey Kong Country Returns. Um, and we'll be doing it by world since there are too many levels to fit on little tab at the bottom like this. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So level 1-1, which is Jungle Hijinks, has decent level design for a first level. At times it can have maybe too many different kinds of enemies for a first level, but it's not overbearing. Um, the secrets are well hidden, and it's a good introduction to the game. Um, Sometimes the background section can be a little bit disconcerting, especially as it can be too far in the background for a mainstay part of the level where you have to go through it. But overall, this is an okay level. There's not anything that particularly stands out to me about this level. The Kong cut is pretty nice, though. I'm going to put it in C tier. Um, Number 1-2, King of Queen. This is a really fun level for me. Um, it introduces the climbing mechanic, obviously, but it also has the piranha plants, whatever you want to call them. Um, it's also fairly fun to speedrun with a lot of interesting strategies that you can take into account. There is another one of those background um, level things, though. Luckily, it's not required unless you're going for puzzle pieces, but it can be a little bit annoying. I'm going to put this in A tier since it's not bad by any metric. It's a very good level, but it doesn't quite go into S tier for me. Treetop Bob is a very short level, but it's well designed for what it is. It introduces the Rambi mechanic, um, and it cleverly has the idea that fire can hurt Rambi, although you pretty much have to fail anyway to unlock this ability in a way. With the fire Tiki Buzz, I'm going to put this in B tier since it's a decent enough level. It's fairly average for Donkey Kong Country Returns. It has a neat gimmick with Rambi in it, but it doesn't really stand out unlike the other Rambi levels to me. Sunset Shore is an S tier for me. Um, it has one of the best soundtracks of any level in the game. Obviously, its soundtrack is amazing. Um, Plus, the whole silhouette theme is a great, not necessarily a gimmick, but the visual effects work well with the enemies that are within it, making the whole level feel very coherent. I'm talking specifically about like the bush zombies and the fact that you can't tell necessarily whether the frogs are going to be horizontally or vertically. Um, of course, this level can be a pain. When I was doing minimum kills, this level gave me kind of a love-hate relationship, but it still stands out as one of the best levels, and definitely the best level of World 1. Now, the same can't be said for Canopy Cannons. Um, this level doesn't really need to exist, honestly. Um, there could have easily been a different kind of level in World 1 that further rounded out some of the basic mechanics of the game. I would have liked to maybe see a ground pound focused level in World 1 rather than a cannon one, because cannons, while yes, it is important to learn timing, it doesn't really seem pertinent compared to the other mechanics of the game, especially since, we have a level right after it, Crazy Cart, which is all about timing with your jumps. So I'm going to put Canopy Cannons in C tier. Crazy Cart is a level that introduces the minecart mechanic, which is pretty fun. I don't particularly care about for this level, but I see why it needs to exist, and the visuals are nice, especially once you come out of the cave. I like the part where you're able to drive on the grass, and I like the variety of enemies that are in the level with the option of jumping on the sticky buzzes or avoiding them completely, of course, besides the fire tiki buzzes. So I'm going to put this one in B tier. Mugly, Mugly, Mugly. So Mugly is an okay first boss. It's fairly similar to bosses like the Koopalings from New Super Mario Bros. Wii, where you just jump on it 3 times, it's over. Well, technically, with Mugly, you jump on it 9 times, but unlike things like the Koopalings, it has a shorter period of time where it's invulnerable. And of course, there's more potential for jumping on it multiple times. But overall, as a boss, it's fairly uninteresting, but pretty inoffensive, so I'm still going to put it in C tier. Platform Panic is a great first Kong level. I really enjoy it, but it's also, I don't know, it doesn't feel particularly World 1. I mean, none of the Kong levels really fit into their respective worlds, so to speak, but this one really stands out to me as kind of like, why is it World 1? I could really see something like Shifting Smashers being an easy World 1. But that's just more a matter of personal preference in terms of level design. This is very well done. It's one of the harder Kong levels, I will say. So it definitely has that difficulty measure. I'm going to put it in A tier because it is definitely one of my favorite Kong levels. And that finishes up World 1. Let's move on now to World 2. So Poppin' Planks is pretty standard. There are some cool speedrunning strategies on it. I've actually personally never been able to get gold on Poppin' Planks. What this says about me as someone who really enjoys Donkey Kong, considers myself at least decent at the game, I don't know, but it's a fairly difficult level to get the hang of. The dynamic way in which the level changes is pretty fun with the moving platforms. Of course, the namesake of the level, which are the popping planks that shoot you up in the air. It has a really cool gimmick around it, one that actually isn't repeated in future levels, which is really cool. I'm going to put this one in B tier because I don't personally care for the level all that much, but it's perfectly fine. And as a first level of Beach, it makes sense why this exists. Sloppy Sands, I used to consider Sloppy Sands one of my favorite levels. However, as I have grown as a Donkey Kong player, I have started to realize that it's really not that amazing. I mean, it's still really good level design, don't get me wrong, but it can be very samey a lot of the times, especially in the beginning, where it begins to drag, and at the very end, where you're just tired of climbing through this dang tower. I do like the shift between vertical and horizontal gameplay. I wish that was something more levels expanded on instead of being strictly vertical or strictly horizontal, like something like Perilous Passage would be. We'll see that again later on in this world, obviously, but I still wish that there was more that played with this mechanic. I'm going to put it in A tier. Peaceful Pier is pretty easy, all things considered. I've always found rock levels to be pretty easy, but that doesn't take away from the level design. But even in terms of the level design, Peaceful Pier can be pretty bland. I do like the anchor at the end. I think it's a pretty fun way of introducing slapstick humor into Donkey Kong. But I'm going to put it at C tier because it's very open, which most Rocket levels are, but it has a different feel than the others that doesn't really sit right with me. Cannon Cluster is a level that I always used to hate and would put in D tier if I was doing this, say, 3 or 4 years ago. However, my view of it has completely changed after I started speedrunning. This is one of my favorite levels of speedrun, and while I'm not great at it, um, I have gotten shiny gold, and it's very fun to figure out different pathways in the level. I like the gimmick. It's not super invasive. It doesn't take over the level completely. It's a good A tier level. The only things really holding it back are that it does tend to be kind of samey, just like Sloppy Sands. There's not a whole lot of extra variety in the level, which I think would really bring this up to an S tier. Stormy Shore is perfectly fine. Squidicus is menacing, but also kind of cute. Well, not cute, but you know what I mean. I just wish this level wasn't so dang hard. For World 2, it's probably one of the harder levels. But I really enjoy it. I'm going to put it in A tier. Again, it's kind of like the other levels where I don't personally despise it in any way, shape, or form. I just think that it has a little bit of something that's missing to make it really great. I like how the background changes and all of that as well. Blowhole Bound has a really cool gimmick, but they didn't do it right, in my opinion. The music is really the only thing that saves this from being D tier. And so I guess I pretty much have to put it in C tier. I could be biased, and I probably am, because of minimum kills. This was a nightmare. It took me several hours to get no kills on Blowhole Bound before I realized I could just damage boost. But I digress. The level is not all that fun, really. It's just looking at a big blue blob in the water for an extended period of time, which isn't particularly appealing. Tidal Terror is an incredibly difficult level, especially for those new to the game. It's one of those levels that I deem to be kind of like filters for the game. If you can get past Tidal Terror, you'll be good up until World 4, I'd say, and then you reach another filter, which I'll talk about later. But Tidal Terror is definitely very difficult. I super Konged my way through it the first several times I played through the game entirely. It's just very difficult to get the timing down, and the enemies are annoying. That being said, it's still a very great level and has an amazing gimmick and level design. I like how it's dark. We can kind of see this with Stormy Shore, but it really comes to light in Tidal Terror. The way the waves wash out is really cool, and the grottos that you enter into to be safe from the waves, they're amazing. This is peak level design in Donkey Kong Country Returns. It's very difficult for what it is, but I'm going to put it in A tier along with many of the others, because it does tend to be a little bland at times, but that's kind of to be expected since it's Tidal Terror. The waves have washed away everything else, so it makes sense that the fields would be very flat and empty. Pinchin Pirates is not a great boss battle. For all intents and purposes, it's kind of unintuitive, especially if you're a new player. Obviously, if you know how to defeat the shell crabs, then you can beat these guys. But I don't know. They have a cute design, but I don't think this saves the boss fight from being one of the less appealing boss fights in the game. I'm going to put it in D tier just because it's repetitive. There's really no reason for me to fight the same crabs twice, and yes, I know their difficulty does go up technically the second time, but if you know how to beat them, then it's just playing the same boss fight twice, and that's not very fun. Tumbling Temple, like I said before, the Kong levels obviously are a big higher spike in difficulty. I like Tumbling Temple personally. It's very difficult, but that's meant to be. This is one of the harder Kong levels. I know I said that about Platform Panic, but we'll get to the easier Kong levels as time goes on. It's definitely very good level design. It's got a very good sense of. It's got a very good aesthetic to it, um, where you have the lava slowly consuming things as you're sinking. Of course, this is obviously very difficult to rank, because personally I don't feel like it fits in with Beach a lot. But again, a lot of the comp levels don't necessarily fit in with their respective worlds. Um, I'm still going to put it at S tier though, because it is really good level design in my opinion. Um, it's it flows well and it brings in enemies, the bones from the sixth world to this world, which makes for a really cool, like, little, not an Easter egg, but like a little reference that says, hey, I know what these enemies are, and they fit in well with the lava theme. I'm surprised that they weren't brought into Volcano for this reason. And that finishes up World 2. World 3, Wonky Waterway, just has never really appealed to me as a level. Um, I know I've said that about quite a few levels, but this level in particular just doesn't feel super inspired. I understand that Ruins does kind of have this problem in general. It's my least favorite world for that reason. It doesn't have the same distinct vibes that the other worlds do. And Wonky Waterway just brings this to the surface immediately. Um, I do like that they brought back the Screaming Pillars. They're one of my favorite enemies. But then again, it's just a very kind of nothing level, and it tends to drag. Um, it it feels much longer than it has any right to feel, especially given that its time that it takes to complete it is actually much less than its follow-up level, Button Bash. That's just because a lot of it feels the same. Um, so I'm going to put it in C tier just because it's not very good. It's not one of the worst levels. There's nothing actively wrong with it. It's just very uninteresting, in my opinion. Button Bash is going to be B tier. The reason why I say that is the level itself doesn't really have a whole lot going for it. It has a lot of the same design issues as something like Sloppy Sands, but without any of like the uniqueness that Sloppy Sands had because of the new introduced enemies. Button Bash can be annoying at times, especially with the ending. Um, there are several forced chambers where you have to kill all the enemies or go through this process X amount of times, and it gets kind of annoying very quickly. Um, but then again, I do like the aesthetic of the level, unlike Wonky Waterways. The reason I say this is because it's inside and it's very actively falling apart. I think if more levels were like this in Ruins, um, and had the kind of like wooden, kind of clunky appearance, rather than the kind of stone mason work that defines a lot of the other interior levels of Donkey Kong, I think I really would have liked Ruins more. And we'll see this again with Damp Dungeon. Overall, Button Bash is definitely a B tier level. B for Button Bash. Mass Blast is another C tier. The reason I say this is because I hate the beach when it intrudes into other worlds. Obviously, Beach was one of our highest ranked worlds so far, but that doesn't mean that I want to play Beach every world now. And Beach has a problem with infringing upon other worlds' property, namely Ruins and Cliff. That being said, it's not badly designed necessarily. Um, it just really feels like it should have been a beach level. Just take out the beginning part. It's the same with Tippy Shippy technically, but Tippy Shippy was a lot harder, so I could see why that was in Cliff. And Tippy Shippy has better level design than Mass Blast. Plus, the gimmick of the bombs following you isn't super fun. It feels meh, personally. I think Tippy Shippy handled the bomb gimmick a lot better. And I don't like the platforming sections on the ship. There's not a whole lot that tells you where you need to go, and a lot of it is relegated to automatic barrels, which isn't very fun. You want to be able to know where you need to go in a lot of levels, and this is an example of a vertical horizontal switch that isn't handled well, unlike Sloppy Sands. Damp Dungeon is definitely A tier. As I said before, I really like the way that Ruins did their interior sections when they did it in such a way that it was like wooden and rank and falling apart. I don't like the stone because it feels very much like the other interior sections of the game. Ruins, in general, like I said, has that problem, but Damp Dungeon is definitely the apex of Ruins. It's what Ruins could have been had there been. Maybe they could have switched the order of the worlds around a little bit and made Ruins before Beach or something like that. Because I definitely say that the Beach levels are in general harder than the Ruins levels, especially with the filter in 2.7. But Damp Dungeon is a good difficulty for this world. It's got a neat gimmick with the rotating wheels. That's not super invasive, but it gives a really nice feel to the level. The red birds recurring throughout is great enemy placement. Um, there's also a random ostrich, which I guess is okay. The sharks are really what kill it, or are really what bring it to the top for me. I really like this big shark. I mean, look at him; he's super goofy. So it's definitely a very fun level to play. Itty Bitty Biters is next. Um, I like the Itty Bitty Biters. They're cute enemies, and I like how there are three different kinds. I know this goes without saying, but it brings an element of diversity to the level, where otherwise it would. Well, actually, technically, there's four different kinds because of the caged one, and they all have their different styles and workarounds. I love this level. I just don't like the aesthetic. It feels kind of similar to Button Bash in a way, and I don't necessarily understand the continuity of it. And of course, the ambushes at the end feel a little bit meh, especially since they throw 5 red um, big biters at you. I'm going to put this in B tier because it's a good level. It's just got a little bit holding it back, and I think had it been in a different world, such as Forest, it would have ranked much higher, perhaps even S tier. I know that's, not nice to Ruins, but Ruins kind of does bring down the um, overall ranking of the worlds contained within it because Ruins is just not a great world. Temple Topple is fine. It's not anything great. It's going to be in C tier because it feels a lot like Wonky Waterway. The Ramby element isn't well done in this stage. It kind of has the same issues as Treetop Bop, where he's used specifically to clear certain obstacles. I also don't like how he's required in this stage, which wasn't necessarily much of a problem for Smoky Peak because the difficulty spike at that point is expected. But I'd rather be able to run through this level Rambulous, if that makes any sense. Um, so it personally ranks a little bit lower for me. I know this is not necessarily bad level design, um, but it does tend to have a lot of expanses that feel the same way a lot. Ruined Roost is a fun boss fight. Of course, the AI on Stu is stupid broken, but it's a perfectly okay boss fight. It's got a lot of charm to it. The drum ticky guy is cute. I'm going to put this at B tier and leave it there. Shifting Smashers is pretty bad. I'm going to be honest, it doesn't feel like it should be a Kong level at all. Maybe they could have done something with like Volcano and done a similar kind of level, but it's very easy compared to the other Kong levels. And it doesn't really feel in place. I get that they want to do some kind of thing with retro blocks and like the old Donkey Kong look, but this just isn't it for me. It also doesn't really feel like Ruins, which I know that's a gripe I've had with all the Kong levels, but it really hits home here because there's really a lot they could have done here, but they didn't. So that kind of brings it down for me. And with that, we're on to World 4. Rickety Rails. I mean, it introduces the blue minecarts, which are great. It's definitely not the best level that does the blue minecarts, but it's very fun. I like how it switches very quickly between on the minecart and off the minecart, like doing platforming, and it requires you to think fast, but not necessarily too fast. The only thing I wish is that the automatic barrels that have the dynamite attached to them, you had to activate them. But if you didn't activate them in time, the dynamite would blow you up. I think that would be a really cool idea that they could implement. But really, that's just like a fan theory, I guess, or like a fan suggestion. So I'm still going to put it in A tier because it's an amazing course, regardless of the missed opportunity for it to be even more fast-paced. I don't even remember what this... Oh, right, Grip and Trip. I always forget the name of this level because there's a lot of levels with the same kind of gimmick name. Grip and Trip, Clingy Swingy, King of Cling, and I guarantee I butchered 5-2's name as well. But Grip and Trip is basically Rickety Rails, but without the issues. Or there weren't really any issues with Rickety Rails. Grip and Trip just shows how much you can do with the blue minecart effect. Something that Roasting Rails didn't even pull off, despite being the last world. So they had a lot more design space to work with. It's really impressive how they managed to make Grip and Trip so fun. It's very difficult, especially if you want to get all the Kong letters, because that N is a pain in the butt to time, but it's still very good. S tier for sure. Bombs Away is charming. I love the mole and this giant bomb, which is why I chose him as the little picture for this level. There's a lot of, like, not mechanics, but precision in this level. You have to know when to duck, and you have to be able to do it at a moment's notice because hazards appear all throughout the level. The bombs being thrown are nice. I wish there were more bombs, personally. I really like the mole throwing the bombs, so I wish that it factored into the level a little bit more. But of course, this is also the first level that we get to see the fantastic rolling minecart sections, which always used to mess me up when I was younger, but now that I have grown, it's definitely very nice. A tier. Mole Patrol. I don't like the sounds that moles make. Personally, that's just a me thing. But that's... Their hitboxes also can be sometimes a little bit unfair, at least in my experience. And while the depth of the train rolling around the tracks in a spiral is very visually interesting, it's also very distracting and very hard to see through it. Luckily, it's ahead of you, so you're not necessarily messed up as much, but it's still kind of distracting. The tunnel part is also fairly... it's a neat touch, but it also drags out for a little bit too long. So I'm going to put this in B tier. It has some flaws, but it's a neat rocket level all in all. Crowded Cavern. Yeah, this is a filter. This is the second filter level that I was talking about, and obviously you can buy the coin key to go to Mole Patrol instead, which is what I did on most of my playthroughs when I was younger, because there was no way I was getting past this guy. The level isn't actually difficult up to the Megabat, but overall, it's really cool. I really like the bats, especially in this level. Um, the Megabat, with the fact that it can shoot sound waves that destroy your it's fun. It's amazing, but it's also incredibly difficult, and it definitely, if you had to swap difficulties of any two levels, I would probably swap Gear Getaway with this one. This one is about on par with Hot Rocket, maybe even a little bit exceeding Hot Rocket, but Gear Getaway was just probably, honestly, way too easy for World 7, and this is way too hard for World 4. B tier. The Mole Train. The most inspired name ever made for a video game. This is such an annoying boss fight. I cannot describe how much I hate it. In theory, it sounds awesome. You play a game of whack-a-mole with moles that are hiding at minecarts, and you're chasing down a train as the minecarts fall off of it. And then you gotta face a big mole that's essentially like a culmination of the other parts. But in practice, this boss fight sucks. Not necessarily because it's difficult, but because it's so long. And there is a way to shorten the length of the boss fight, but it greatly increases your chances of having to go all the way back to square one. I wish this boss had a checkpoint system or something. It's really the only boss in the game that requires it, because it happens in 3 separate stages where you have to hit. Well, actually, technically, it happens in 4 different stages. 3 of those stages you have to hit 10 different enemies, and then the last one you have to hit one enemy 3 times. So it's very difficult, but that's not really the issue. The issue is that it's so tedious. D tier. Jagged Jewels. This level is beautiful. It's visually stunning. In practice, it's a pain. I used to think Perilous Passage was the hardest level in the game. This is quickly becoming contender. This is literally the only level that's holding me back from 200%, because I can't beat a mirror mode. It's getting incredibly annoying. But grudges aside, it's a decently designed level. It's not offensively bad. It does kind of get boring after a while, especially as it outstays its welcome near the end. If they had cut out a couple of sections, I think it would really shine as one of the best levels in the game. But as it is, especially because of the fact that Kong levels have no checkpoints, this level is C tier for me, because it's too long. It's kind of got the same issue as Mole Train, except it's cooler than Mole Train and isn't Mole Train. All right, on to World 5. This is easily my favorite world. It's got some of the most beautiful levels in the game, and its music is the best. All the way from Vine Valley to Long Shot Launch. Even Manga Ruby Run is amazing. I don't like the jungle music, so this level right here, but it's still good regardless. Muncher Marathon, even the Crystal Cave soundtrack is awesome from 5-1. 5-1 is really long, and I don't necessarily have an issue with long levels, especially because this one does have a fairly fair checkpoint system. It's got, if I remember correctly, 2 or 3 checkpoints through the level, and it's fun. Some of the vine sections feel a little bit much, and I know I'm saying this in a game where you can roll into a pit and then jump out, but the physics of it don't make sense, and sometimes they look a little bit unnatural. I'm going to put it in B tier. It's a fun level. The music, of course, is amazing, and if it didn't have the music that it did, it would probably be C tier. This level doesn't have the saving grace that Vine Valley does. It's got a little bit of cool platforming, but the timing sometimes can just suck, especially because you just get stuck if you don't make a jump. So you have to wait on the swinging platform for another 10 minutes until it swings back around. There are also a couple of fairly unfair enemies scattered throughout the level, verging on enemy spam once you get to the lower platforming sections, where you have to contend with the plants that shoot the spikes plus the bats at the same time. I'm going to be putting this one in C tier because it's decently designed for a level. It's just not great. Flutter Flyaway is one of my favorite levels in the game. Not only to speedrun because it's so smooth, and some of the jumps that you make in Flutter Flyaway are incredible and look like they shouldn't work, but the fact that Flutter Flyaway is just so beautiful. Um, I honestly think it would have done better if it had the Vine Valley music instead of the Longshot Launch music, but that's the only issue I have with this level, and the rest of the mechanics of the level more than make up for it. The caged up buzzes are amazing. The vines that they rotate around are cool, and there's just so much that this level has going for it. So many unique effects. It does the forest all of its justice. S tier. Tip and Totems used to be an S tier level for me. It was my favorite level in the game for a while. But I've kind of mellowed towards it, especially since speedrunning it has been a nightmare. I've probably lost more runs to Tip and Totems than any other level in the game, besides like Jungle Hijinks. Um, but it's still very fun. It's got a nice vibe to it. I love the aesthetic of the totems swinging back and forth. The hippos are the only thing that feel really just out of place in the level. And near the end, it does kind of feel like it's going on a bit too long. But the rest of the aesthetics of this level, plus the Vine Valley music, make it easily A tier. Longshot Launch is very cool. It's got a lot of very precision things to do in here. There's also the long shot launch skip, where you can just go over top of the level, which is cool. I personally think that this level would be that being said, long shot launch also does have the issue that its music just isn't as good as Vine Valley's. That hasn't really been an issue for any of the other courses, though, so I'm going to rank it fairly without taking music into, without docking it for not being Vine Valley. In terms of music, I'm going to put it with Tip and Totems because it's got a really interesting kind of aesthetic. I wish that it had been on a. I wish it had been on the Springy Spores track instead. If Springy Spores and Tip and Totems could do a swap, I think that would actually make more sense in general, because it feels kind of samey going from Tip and Totems to Longshot Launch with the little like totem heads that crush you if you're not quick enough. But it's overall a really fun level. Springy Spores is fine. It's not anything special. It easily could have just been spread out among the other levels, especially the ones that are kind of short and don't have a whole lot of time that you need to complete them. Looking at you like Wigglevine Wonders and Flutter Flyaway. Um, there's just a little bit that could be done with this level to make it really good. It's not bad. It's just not anything to phone home about. Wigglevine Wonders goes into the same tier as Vine Valley, I think. Mainly because it's fun. I love the guys with the faces on them. They don't make any sense, but that's fine. Who said it had to make sense? Um, but the I don't know. It can feel, like I said before, I don't like levels with a lot of repetition. That doesn't feel like thematic. And this just kind of feels weird. You're just kind of floating through empty space. Um, but overall, I really like the Wigglevine gimmick. It's fun. Muncher Marathon is A tier. Um, it's crazy hard, that's for sure, especially if you're not refined to speedrun, or if you're not a speedrunner, because you're not coded to go through a level quickly enough. I guess this really goes without saying, though. Of course, Muncher Marathon has a lot going for it besides the speed aspect, besides the running gimmick. It's actually one of the more creepy levels in the game. If you took out the Munchers, it would still be a very playable level on its own. Um, it wouldn't be very difficult. But a couple of additions would make it fine on its own. So it's a gimmick level that doesn't need its gimmick to remain good, and that's what I like about it. Mango Ruby Rush is easily a top tier fight. Um, it's very fun, but at the same time, it's also like very visually stunning. The aesthetic of Mango Ruby Rush is something that can't be beat. Um, the Mango Ruby is just so beautiful. The flower eyes are amazing. Um, it's regal and majestic. I've really come around on this boss um, since I first started playing the game. Because at first I thought this boss was annoying, I thought it was too long, but honestly, if you know the patterns, if you know how the main Ruby is going to come at you, it's really fun to play against. And I love the bosses that have a little bit more variety than just, I'm running along the ground, find a way to kill me. Um, this was an issue. Um, this was the issue with Stu, is that it had that, but it also didn't because it was so easy to avoid. Manga Ruby provides a much bigger challenge, and it's genuinely more engaging. That being said, Blast and Bounce is trash. Um, it's not like obnoxious trash, so that's why it's not in D tier. But it's pretty bad. I don't like it. It's too open. It's too finicky. It's too precision based. There's just not a whole. First of all, there's not a whole lot of room for error, which is okay since it's a Kong level. I kind of understand that, but given that you only go into this level technically with 2 hearts, unless you're using heart boost, you have to make some really close shaves, especially during the last part of the level where you're dodging the little things as you're blasting up and then down. It feels kind of unfair. Um, but again, it's not terrible, so that's why it's not lower. World 6, Sticky Situation is a perfectly fine beginning level. I really like the aesthetic of Cliff, but this just doesn't feel great. Like, it's not an amazing level. It's C tier. It's fine. The platforming is sometimes kind of finicky, which is why it's not ranked B. Um, the bone platforms just need a little bit more work, I think, to make them really work. Um, the inconsistency of the bone cart guys also kind of bugs me. They have 2 fire ones, if I remember correctly, or is it? I don't remember, but it's a fun level. I like the cliff, but it's just not anything that stands out to me. Prehistoric Path is B tier. It's fine. It's a fun design. I love the fact that you can ride on an egg. That's a really neat idea. Of course, why is there an actual egg sitting here? Because all the dinosaurs are fossilized. That's something we'll never know. Um, Also, it's reckless and dangerous to ride an egg. That being said, um, it's got a neat design, um, but some of the edges are a little bit unforgiving on this level. Um, and I personally have too many bad experiences with it for it to be ranked higher. I have some fond memories, but those fond memories quickly get soured by remembering, oh yeah, I jumped and barely missed the edge of this platform and blew up. So yeah, screw this level, but also I love this level. It's a very love-hate level. Weighty Way. This level kind of has the issue with a couple of levels have had with feeling kind of samey. I do like how it kind of adds to the variety as the level progresses, where you have to like break blocks in order to move platforms, or the platforms that snap. They really got a lot of mileage over a simple pulley system. Um, but it still doesn't really make up for the fact that it's the same gimmick repeated like dozens of times. It's not great, but it's also not bad. It's fun. I like the Weighty Way soundtrack. Um, it's definitely a level I enjoy speedrunning as well. It's fun to try and save as much time as possible on it. Boulder Roller. Oh boy. This level was one of the most annoying levels as a kid. Um, I could never beat it. It was just so difficult. I wasn't really that good of a player, obviously. I didn't know how to run, which was an issue. So I would always try to roll from one boulder's hiding point to the next. And then I would get hurt, obviously, and then I would lose Diddy Kong the next boulder session. And then I would have to try and escape the big boulder with only Donkey Kong, which is obviously very difficult, especially if you don't know how to run. But now that I, am better at playing the game, this is a really fun and interesting level. Um, there's a weird thing right before the checkpoint where oh, I got to go down a section, which is interesting. I like how the big boulder just kind of menacingly follows you around the stage. No idea why releasing one boulder causes boulders to appear on ropes and start swinging, but that's interesting. It's a fun level. It's kooky, and the music, despite just being a sped up and more amplified version of Sticky Situation, is a bop. I love it. Precarious Plateau, or is it Prehistoric Plateau? It's some kind of plateau. It's a fine Rampy level. It's probably one of my more favorite Rampy levels besides Smoky Peak. It's fun. I like how Rampy really feels like he belongs in Cliff, which we'll get to later. We'll talk about that a little bit more once we get to 6B. But Rampy just feels like he was made for the cliff. He breaks the rocks. The fire enemies also fit kind of intuitively here, oddly enough. Especially with the fire aesthetic that this boy brings. Hoo Hoo, which is my name for him. He's Hoo Hoo. But yeah, Precarious Plateau is A tier. Crumbling Canyon is, I'd say, A tier as well. It's fun. It's nothing amazing, but it's fun. I like how it quickly changes from this weird platforming, oh wow, we've got the moving things from before, the things that fall. I don't know how to describe them. The things that look like hammers. You step on them and they fall. You know what I'm talking about. But it quickly changes to a running away level with a lot of the same kind of elements as before. Some of the platforms breaking in this level don't feel supernatural. But overall, it's really fun, and I've had some very close calls with this level in particular that I've just absolutely adored. Um, they're really fun to rewatch. This level definitely has a lot of replayability because it's always difficult to outrun Hoo Hoo. That being said, let's move on to Tippy Shippy. Tippy Shippy is okay. It's C tier. I don't particularly care for the pirates to be back. I will say it is technically better than Mass Blast, which was the same tier if I remember correctly. Yeah, I mean, but it is better than Mass Blast. I will say that, but just because it's on the cliff and it fits better with cliff aesthetics. I like how the airships are floating around, destroying platforms. That's a neat thing. The end of the level is very unfair, though. I don't really know what I'm doing in that. I'm just kind of running. The platforms fall too fast for you to really recover in any way, shape, or form. So it can be very unfair, and I'm pretty sure there's just a random hole somewhere that's kind of blocked by the foreground. It can be kind of confusing near the end, and the cannon platforms are unfair. I will say that. They're annoying, but it's not awful, so I'm going to leave it there. Clifftop Climb is B tier. It's essentially Wadey Way again. It's just not got the gimmick of Wadey Way, but it is vertical, which is essentially its gimmick. I like how Fugly's High Rise is in the background. I like that it has the crumbling platforms that force you to move higher and higher. There's nothing really super interesting about this level. It's perfectly fine for Cliff, and this is a standard Cliff level. It makes perfect sense for it to be in B tier. Yeah, I mean, it was obvious where this guy was going from the beginning. Thugly is well known as the worst boss in Donkey Kong Country Returns. He's not cool. He's just a reskin of Mugly, first of all, which is most people's gripe with him. And as a lot of people have said, it would have been way cooler had they done a Rambi fight. Like, you fight like this bone triceratops or something. That's not my idea, by the way. Don't quote me on that. Thugly is he's just Mugly, but with more tediousness. He takes much longer to kill because he just has so many random attacks, like, oh, I can breathe fire. Oh, I'm going to ground pound again. And yes, Mugly does do those things, but unlike Mugly, you can't hit this guy multiple times. And unlike Mugly, this guy does it on stage 1, which is always fun. I always love when a boss forces you to extend things out. But yeah, I'm going to say that Thugly is definitely D tier. Now on to what is arguably the second hardest level in the game, Perilous Passage. Clearing this thing in mirror mode was a nightmare. But clearing it the first time was even worse. Once you know how to dodge the electric bugs, it becomes a little bit more trivial to pass this level, but it's still very difficult. The difficulty isn't necessarily a part of the level design, though, and this level is just so amazing in terms of its level design. It's fun. It's a level that I'll boot up if I'm willing to put in a really hard challenge. When I'm not speedrunning, this level is one of the levels that I'll go to for a challenge and for a lot of interest and variety. The platforming is unique. Just the idea of this chamber filling up with lava is something that we never see in Donkey Kong Country Returns. I mean, there's definitely not another level that does the exact same thing, where a chamber is filling up with lava. It's just something that's never been done before, and that excites me. A tier. The only thing keeping it from being S tier is bad memories of it, and also the fact that near the end it's a little bit hard to platform on. which, like I said, difficulty isn't necessarily a factor, but this one it is, because they really should be more than like 2 springs to platform on and like a couple of like tiny little platforms that the electric book will find you on. And from then we move on to World 7. So Foggy Fumes is another one of those levels that's, got the really nice aesthetics. It's kind of gross looking, but it's also kind of good looking. That's the weird thing about silhouette levels, especially this one, because that's smoke, but it just looks so amazing because you've learned to associate with sunset. It's a really neat, socioeconomic critique about how the dangers of late stage capitalism are ruining the world. And that's something that I never really expected in a Donkey Kong game. Oh wait, he's wearing red. Never mind. Setting that aside, Foggy Fumes is perfectly fine for a level. Some of the platforms obscured by the smog and the background sections of the level aren't fun. I don't know whose idea that was, but they should be fired immediately. That is only half a joke. That's not fun to play with. But overall, it's got nice aesthetics, but that's kind of countered by the playability of this level. It's not a level that I definitely go to when choosing a level in Donkey Kong Country Returns to play. It's a level that I just go through when I'm going through the game. And that's it. I don't go back to play this level often. I've got my gold on it. I don't need anything else. Slam and Steel has a really nice soundtrack. I really wish that more levels made use of it. Because honestly, the switcheroo track just isn't great. I'm gonna say that. Slam and Steel, though, is fun as far as levels go. It doesn't have a whole lot of variety, but there's not really a whole lot you can do. There's a couple of things they could have done, and I think that they could have definitely done better. But overall, it's a really good level. It's definitely very factory-esque, you could say. Handy Hazards. This guy in the background right here, as much as I love Colonel Cluck, this guy should have been the boss for World 7. Just make 2 bosses for World 7, this guy and Colonel Cluck. That being said, Handy Hazards is really nice as far as levels go. The hand gimmick never gets old. It's got some of the best replayability in the game, and it's a short and sweet level. It's one of the quickest complete times in the game, if I remember correctly, as far as world records go. And it's always worth it to play Handy Hazards if you can. Gear Getaway just isn't that good. So always get the coin key. S tier. There's not really a whole lot I can say about the level besides that. It's just a really fun level and has really nice aesthetics. Like, it's hands. How can you get more fun than hands? Gear Getaway is, very boring. It just doesn't feel particularly inspired. I get the idea. I just don't think it was put into practice very well. There are just so many repeating elements that when you get to the gear finale at the end, you're just tired of seeing gears, and you just want the level to be over. Other Rocket levels have managed to balance the elements within them a little bit better than Gear Getaway. This is easily C tier for me. It's one of the worst Rocket levels. And really, for a late game Rocket level, there's no excuse for it to be this bland. There's a lot more they could have done. Bring in those snake guys from the concept art that shoot razors out of their mouths. That would have been fun. I don't care if they're basically reskins of the lava snakes from Hot Rocket. It seems like we're just going down now, because Cockjog is D tier. and I'm not going to elaborate on that. Switcheroo is just such a fun gimmick. I wish it didn't have some of the same issues as Cogjog, but I'm not going into that because I said I wouldn't elaborate on Cogjog. But Switcheroo just, its gimmick is amazing. It just kind of drags on in a little bit, a couple of times. Um, it's it's perfectly inoffensive though. I'd say it falls into the same category as like Vodka Fumes, where it's not a level that I'll necessarily go back and replay a whole lot, but it's a level that I'm definitely not dismayed to see pop up when I go through the game. Um, Plus, the way that the red button is hidden in this level is sweet. It's actually fairly well hidden, and that's something that I enjoy. Music Madness is actually really well designed. I used to hate it because it was difficult. It's very difficult, and yes, the hammer hitboxes at the end are unpredictable and unfair. Um, and plus, this level has the hidden secret of the Wii menu um, modifications, where you can like mess with the timing of the obstacles, which is something you can't do in any other level. I'm going to put this in A tier because it has some of the same issues as Simon Steel. There could have been more with it. Like, why did they use fire and water on music levels? That doesn't make sense. They could have done something else, like a trombone. But, this is perfectly fine. It's a cool level. Feather Fiend is, again, a top tier boss. Um, there's just something about this dude. He's so goofy. You pound on his undersides for a little bit, and then his legs explode, and you have to hit his head while he shoots out eggs. Um, and that's just really goofy and enigmatic. It's really what Stu should have been. And honestly, the fact that Colonel Cluck exists is probably why Stu is so painful. Why Stu doesn't get the limelight is because Colonel Cluck exists. He's more goofy, he's way crazier, and he's more difficult by far. Um, this is a boss that even speedrunners still have issues with, especially with getting things like triple hits. Um, in a way, he's almost like the last Bowser Jr. fight from World 8 in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. He's very similar in a couple of ways. Treacherous Track is B tier. Again, it's not a level that I go back to play a whole lot. I played it when I was getting the Shiny Gold time, but that's about it. There are a couple of really neat tricks you can do on this level, but it's a very formulaic level in terms of its planning and outline. However, it's got a really neat gimmick. Trying to hit the lanterns so that you can continue doing the level is fun until you start missing the lanterns for the 1,000th time in a row, and then it's annoying. This level is very difficult, which I come to expect of a Kong level, but this one in particular is just wow. It's still fun though. I just don't go out of my way to play it. And finally, Worlds 8 and 9. You will notice that the Golden Temple levels from 3DS aren't on here. That's because I've never played them, so I'm not going to be ranking them. Sorry. That being said, we're definitely not ending with the worst levels, besides a couple. Volcano is a fun world. It just has a couple of issues that it suffers from. One of which is that a lot of the levels feel very similar, especially these two. Like, I legitimately couldn't find watermarks that really differentiated these two levels without you having to look too closely. So yeah, I have the little lava ball section that you have to run through in Bobbing Basalt, and the terrible moving melters section at the end. So Furious Fire is a great introduction. It's probably one of the best first levels in the world. I'm going to say it's honestly S tier. But, I mean, Furious Fire is just there's nothing that I can say bad about it, and there's just a lot going for it. It's not a level that I necessarily went into this expecting to be S tier, but now that I think about it, it's a level that I go to replay a lot, and it's a great first level for the world, and definitely the best level in the world, by far. That being said, Hot Rocket is a great contender for that spot. Um, it's got the cool fire snakes. It's got some of the most precision rocketing in the game. And it's the only rocket level that I actually find challenging besides Crowded Cavern. Of course, it does have the issue of being feeling a little bit too open near the hot snake area, which is my only kind of issue with it, but it's still kind of a non-issue because it's, fire snakes. Roasting rails is terrible. Um, I'm gonna put it in C tier because my gut reaction was terrible, but it's not technically bad. It would have been really, really bad if it wasn't a blue minecart level, because I find the blue minecart level is genuinely more interesting. If this had been like a regular minecart level, I would have bawled my eyes out and probably not finished the game ever. So literally, my entire opinion of Donkey Kong Country Returns hinges on this being a blue minecart. Jokes aside, roasting rails just doesn't feel super interesting to me. Like, I get that there's some cool platforming, but it feels like they just took the level, that shortcut level in World 8 from New Super Mario Bros. Wii, the roller coaster level, and they just turned it into a Donkey Kong level. That's what it honestly feels like. They just amped up the difficulty because this is Donkey Kong Country Returns we're talking about, not those little like newbie New Super Mario Bros. Wii games. And next is Smoky Peak. Smoky Peak is not the best level in World 8, but it is definitely one of the best. The lava droplets that kill you instantly, genius. Also, this level is amazing because it's a silhouette level on a volcano, and it combines the best of Sunset Shore and a little bit of the best of Furious Fire, and it's a beautiful union. I wish there were more fire enemies though. Like, why aren't there flaming Tiki Buzzes here? But that's just like more of a light-hearted jest, like a little jab at the level rather than an actual criticism. Because this is a really good level. It's well designed. The little chase at the end is it gets my heart pumping every time. I have died a couple of times to kind of unfair ledge mechanics, but it's fine. This level still has a special place in my heart. Unlike Bobbing Basalt, which is just okay. It's another level that's just kind of mediocre. It's a neat gimmick, but they didn't really make a whole lot of use of it, and it just doesn't feel super great. That there's a weird statue that you just run through. It's more of like a temple that descends into the lava as you're going up it, which is first of all really weird, and also there's an annoying top section to that, which always gets me. It's just not a great level. I'm going to be honest. It just feels like filler. Moving Melters is kind of the same, except Moving Melters doesn't necessarily feel like filler. It just feels like missed up. Like, it feels like there's something missing from the level, and the ending doesn't really help it. It almost feels like they didn't know what to do with the moving melter mechanic. Like, you've got the spheres running around in the lava, but there's not a whole lot besides that going for it. I don't know what to say about it. The little section at the end is also kind of obnoxious. It's a neat kind of gimmick, but it feels almost too much like Bobbing Basalt to be separate tiers. Red Dead Rising is B tier. It's a cool level. Um, like I said, lava rising mechanic is interesting. It was interesting for Perilous Passage. It was great for Perilous Passage, actually. But Red Road Rising is just kind of, it's not great. I'm not a huge fan of it. This little section right here is one of the hardest platforming sections in the game. Don't at me on that. Um, it's okay. It's like I've said for a couple of other levels. It's nothing to phone home about. It's nothing to get excited about. Even it's just a level that I play through because it's a level that exists. And if you're only doing it with Donkey Kong, it's a pain. I mean, Lee has quite literally just quit speedruns on this level because this level is a pain to complete without Donkey Kong, without Diddy Kong. And without further ado, the final boss of the game, Tiki Tong Terror. As far as final bosses go, this isn't actually bad. It combines a couple of neat elements from the other bosses, like the stew sweep. Um, it's an interesting mechanic how they do the buttons. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense why he would intentionally create buttons that could kill him on his hands, but I guess it's okay. But overall, Tiki Tong is a very fun boss. Not one of the greatest. He's not like super charismatic or anything, but I do like the little vomity boy. Also, that speaking of that, the vomit sequence is splendid. I couldn't believe what I was seeing the first time I played through the game. 5 Monkey Trial. We're almost at the end of the game now, and well, it doesn't really get better. 5 Monkey Trial and Golden Temple are both B tier levels. Let's start with 5 Monkey Trial, and then we'll get to Golden Temple. 5 Monkey Trial is an interesting concept in theory, but in practice, it's just kind of weird. Like there's an infinite coins area with the little sloppy sands squid shooters. I think that's 3rd trial, or maybe 4th. It may be 4th. The boulder trial can be incredibly difficult if you don't know what you're doing. But again, difficulty isn't really a measure of ranking. This level is interesting, but it doesn't really hold up super well. It's not a level that I'd actively seek out to go play, which has kind of been the metric for B tier. It's a level that's perfectly inoffensive, but doesn't really appeal personally to me. And it's the same thing with the Golden Temple. It's a fun, goofy little level, but the banana platforms are just very unfair to me personally, and some of the it's just a little off-putting. The platforming isn't great. It's just not a normal level. It doesn't really fit in with the rest of the game, so I don't personally like it all that much. I'd totally get it if someone said this was their favorite level in the game. It's goofy and fun, as I've said before, but that doesn't really sit with me. The cherries on a stick are also some of the most annoying platforms in the game. I hate them with a passion. By the way, you can just jump back and forth between them. Don't tell anyone I said that. The teleporting tickies are also kind of annoying. But again, this is meant to be the last level in the game, so I understand that they made it so difficult. It's just their choices and how they made it super difficult are a little questionable. I guess that concludes the tier list. So thank you for watching. I will try and think of more content to release. This has been a new experience for me, so let me know what kind of feedback you guys have and how I can develop in the future. Thank you, and bye.